In the previous class, we have discussed total fixed cost, total cost, total variable cost, and those are all coming under short run cost. So today again we are going to discuss about this, the short run average cost curves. So in the previous class we just discussed the total cost curves of the short run, but now we are going to discuss about the average cost curves when it comes to the short run cost. So again, there are three types of average cost curves, that is average fixed cost, and then average variable cost, and also the average total cost. So we shall discuss them one by one. So as I have just mentioned, we have explained above about the short run total cost curves. So it is short run total cost curves. However, the cost concept, the concept of cost is more frequently used both by businessmen and also economics in terms of, or in the form of, cost per unit, or in simple word it is the average cost rather than the total cost. So as a businessman and as an economics, we usually use the concept of cost in the form of cost per unit, or it is in the form of average cost that we usually use rather than the totals. That is why we are going to discuss or study the short run average cost curves. In the first place, what we have is average fixed cost. So what is an average fixed cost? It is the total fixed cost divided by the number of units of output that is produced. So average fixed cost is nothing but the cost per unit of output. So in equation we can give like this: average fixed cost equals to total fixed cost divided by the output or number of units of output that is produced. So in simple term, it is nothing but the cost that is charged per unit of output. That is average fixed cost. And since total fixed cost is constant quantity, we have discussed in the previous class when we discussed the total fixed cost, we have said that this total fixed cost is constant throughout, no matter the level of quantity that is produced. So since this total fixed cost is a constant quantity, what you will see is the average fixed cost will steadily fall as output increases. So as output keeps on increasing, you will find that average fixed cost will steadily fall, because average fixed cost is nothing but the total fixed cost divided by quantity. So if this total fixed cost keeps on, or since it is a constant quantity, this total fixed cost will remain constant, but when output increases, it will naturally hamper the average fixed cost, which will decline as output increases, because this total fixed cost is fixed, and when this output increases, it will lead to the fall in the average fixed cost. That is why, since total fixed cost is a constant quantity, average fixed cost will steadily fall as output increases, because we have to divide the total fixed cost by the output, and when this total fixed cost is constant and when this output increases, then average fixed cost will automatically decline or steadily fall as output keeps on increasing. So that is what it meant. So you will see even from the figure that this average fixed cost keeps on declining. So it is falling from left to the right, it is falling downwards. That is why the output, as output increases, the average fixed cost declines because of the constancy of the total fixed cost. And it will come to a point where when output become very large, when output is very large, this average fixed cost will approach to 0 unit. So it is going to approach to 0 when the output level of output is very large. So this is the diagrammatical representation of average fixed cost, and we have explained the cost concept of totals, total fixed cost, total variable cost, all those with the help of the schedule or with the help of the table also. So likewise, we shall also explain this average fixed cost with the help of a table. So as you can see from this table number 2, average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost are all given here. And we have discussed what is total fixed cost, total variable cost, total cost, and how we obtain this total cost and all. So we have discussed this part. What we are going to discuss is average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. So first, average fixed cost. So when output, level of output was 1, and we have said that total fixed cost is constant. And what is the average fixed cost? It is 50. So output has increased to 2 units. And since total fixed cost is constant at 50, so it is remaining 50. And what we get in average fixed cost is 25. To get this average fixed cost, what do? We divide the total fixed cost by the units of output. So 50 divided by 2 is 25. So that is how we got average fixed cost. And again, further, unit of output has increased to 3 units. And how do we get average fixed cost? We divide this total fixed cost, which is 50, which is constant, by the number of units, that is 3. So 50 divided by 3 is 16.67. So you will observe that as level of output increases, it increases till 8 unit, total fixed cost being constant, you will notice that this average fixed cost keeps on declining. So when it is producing 8 unit of output, total fixed cost being constant at 5, dividing 50 by 8, we get 6.25. So it keeps on declining. And when output keeps on increasing, when it is very large, this average fixed cost value will approach to 0. So that is the property of average fixed cost. And again, let us consider diagram or figure number 2. Average fixed cost continuously falls down, as you can see from this diagram, from this figure 2. So it will be seen that the fixed cost, the average fixed cost curve continuously falls towards or falls throughout. So mathematically speaking, average fixed cost curve approaches both axes. So it is approaching to the y-axis, it is approaching towards the x-axis, it is approaching towards both the axes asymptotically. So it is the same way it is approaching on the y-axis, it is also approaching on the x-axis. That is what it means by asymptotically. So in other words, AFC, this average fixed cost, gets very nearer to but never touches either of the axes. So it will never touches y-axis, it will never touches x-axis, but it is approaching towards both the axes. That is another unique property of AFC, average fixed cost curve. And again, the average fixed cost curve possesses another important property. So what is that property? So if we pick any point, on this curve, if we pick any point on this average fixed cost curve and multiply the average fixed cost at that point with the corresponding quantity of output, then the product is always the same. So take a point here, any point here, and then what do? You multiply the average fixed cost at that point with the corresponding quantity of output. So you take any point at this curve and then multiply the output, that is multiply what you have to do, you have to multiply this average fixed cost curve with the corresponding output, and the product you get while from the multiplying will be the same all throughout in this curve. That is also another important property of average fixed cost. Why is that happening? It is nothing but because of the product of the average fixed cost and the corresponding quantity of output will yield total fixed cost, which remain constant throughout. So it is because of the total fixed cost again that remains constant. Because of the constancy of the total fixed cost, we are able to get the product same when we multiply the average fixed cost on any point on the average fixed cost curve with the corresponding level of output. So a curve with such a property is called rectangular hyperbola. So the property or the curve which is possessing such type of property is called rectangular hyperbola. So you take any point on this curve and multiply the average fixed cost curve with the corresponding level of output, and the product that you get in multiplying is the same all throughout. And any curve that is possessing that kind of property is called rectangular hyperbola. So that is all about, average fixed cost curve. Next up we have average variable cost, AVC. So what is average variable cost? So we have discussed what is variable cost. And average means cost per unit when we talk about the average cost. So what is average variable cost? So it is nothing but the total variable cost divided by the number of units of output produced. So in short, we can give average variable cost can be given by total variable cost divided by the output that is produced, where Q represents the total output produced. So you just divide the total variable cost by the total output that is produced, and what you will get is the average variable cost. So variable cost per unit of output, it is nothing but the variable cost per unit of output. And what is the property of average variable cost? Average variable cost falls as output increases from zero to normal capacity output because of the increasing returns. And again, beyond this normal capacity, the average variable cost will rises steeply because of the decreasing returns. So we have also discussed when we talk about the law of variable proportion what is increasing returns and also decreasing returns. So you will see two phases in average variable cost. That one phase, the first phase is, it increases from zero to normal capacity. So it is when the output is rising from zero to normal capacity output, the average variable cost falls. So in the beginning, the average variable cost will fall, but beyond a normal capacity, once the level of normal capacity of output has reached, then the average variable cost curve will rise steeply. It will rise due to the operation of the decreasing return. So there are two phases. One is fall of the output, and then after a normal capacity level of output is reached, then it will rise steeply due to the operation of the decreasing returns. Falling of output is due to the increasing returns, due to the operation of the increasing returns. So as you see from the diagram, this is average variable cost, ABC. So at first point, what you see is the fall of the average variable cost. And when it reaches a normal capacity output, let us say at this point, it rises steeply because of the operation of the as I've said, decreasing returns is. So first phase it falls, and then second phase it is rising steeply because of the operation of the increasing returns or the decreasing returns. The fall happens because of the increasing returns, and then the steep rise occurs due to the operation of the decreasing returns. So that is the two phase that we see in the average variable cost curve. And then even from the table you will see that this average variable cost, at first it falls from 20 to 17 variable cost, but once it reaches a normal capacity output, what it happens is it rises in very steeply. It rises from 20, 25, 29, 31, 33, 35. So when it reaches a normal capacity output, you will notice the steep rise of the average variable cost. And how you get average variable cost? You divide the total variable cost by the number of units that is produced. So at first 20 divided by 1 is 20, and the next is 35 divided by 2 is 17.50, and at level of output 8, since total variable also changes, you divide 284 divided by 8, and what you get is 35.50. So that is how you obtain average variable cost. You divide the total variable cost by the number of units that is produced. So that is average variable cost. So before explaining what is average total cost, we shall give a little relationship that occurs between average total cost and average variable cost. So as you can already assume, average total cost is the sum. So average total cost is the sum of both the average variable cost and average fixed cost. So therefore, as output increases, the average fixed cost becomes smaller and smaller. And what happens is the vertical distance between the average total cost curve and the average variable cost curve goes on declining. And again, when this average fixed cost curve approaches to x-axis, so when this curve approaches to x-axis, the average variable cost, this one, approaches the average total cost curve. So when this AFC curve is approaching towards the x-axis, this AVC is approaching towards the average total cost. So you can see from this diagram. So that is the little relationship that occurs between these three.